Good evening, everybody. Hope you guys are having a good week this Wednesday night. I just want to give a quick shout out and say thank you so much. This past week we had another opportunity to go out into the community and to be able to share and deliver some meals to those in the community in this time. And so we want to say thank you to the Navajo Nation Christian Response Team and Pastor Nathan Lynch and all the hard work they're doing up at Rehoboth and be able to get resources out all across the nation. And we want to say a special thank you to Cassandra and Andrew from the Senior Center and Miss Cindy, who helped out as well. We want to say thank you guys for helping us get connected with those that need some resources. We just appreciate the opportunity to be able to serve. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. Wouldn't be able to do it without any of you guys. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Tonight, if you guys have your Bibles, you can go ahead and go into the Gospel of John, chapter 11. We're going to continue through our Bible study. Last week, we did the first half of chapter 11, and we begin to see the story of Lazarus get set up. And so Jesus does 7 miracles in the book of John, and so we're going to see the 7th happen tonight. And when we were studying through last week, we began to see the setup, and I told you that more than anything else, this is a story of faith. Right, that's what we begin to see, that Jesus wants to build your and my faith. And so from the very beginning, Jesus finds out that Lazarus is sick, and he makes a declaration that this sickness is not going to end in death. It is for the glory of God. He makes that promise. Then he begins to work with Mary and building her faith, reminding her of what does she believe. And then tonight we're going to see how that continues to unfold. And so tonight we're going to check out the story of Lazarus. In John chapter 11, we're going to go from verse 38 through 57. John chapter 11, verse 38. We're going to go through verse 44. It says that Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And so they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you have always heard me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go."
Lazarus does started nabit ilza. Jesus ayeden nahwis nako tana o tsel jenia etana o zago tse tadana tana ho zago tse tadana ako Jesus dini tana wuche osmas den netas taniki billah Marta akhalne borne ajil chunjes le khalati ti iskanda tazsta Jesus anaj dotni that dosh benel wishneta inet lago dinga ye ayot e yidiltse a Lazarus yo aliagi tanach tazismas Jesus degoden ego anne shitra shidisnet aginetje ba hensen a large shidin agi shilbe hosen de ne kona zenigi shinil agi de dot lans beniye benaf adishne khut ego khajot zigo yego khashtol rashko ashtini Lazarus was dead and that is Sanigi Nag at Ahedal Guy Halla Ado Hake Bikita des Disco Hanijel to be the order Bikites Disco Chishnia Ako Jesus Ahodini Hakenda or Argo Hodado Cheat.
So when we see these verses, right, we need to be reminded once again, because this is where it ended off last week, of the love that Jesus has for you and I. When we begin to see this, it says that Jesus wept. We looked at that last week, right? Why was he weeping? He was weeping because he already knew what he was going to do, but he saw that the people were hurting. And because they hurt, he hurt. And he was also hurting because he saw that death was active. And last week we saw Jesus give the I am statement. I am the resurrection and I am the life. Death was never a part of God's creation. Right? When God created Adam and Eve, the world was perfect, and death entered the world because of sin. It entered the world because of a separation from God. So if Jesus is the life and the resurrection, death is the exact opposite of him. Death is the enemy. But while we live in this world, it will continue to operate in this world. And so Jesus, until he comes to give the world a brand new start, death is going to be active. And so he weeps because he sees these things happening that he does not desire, because he loves us. All right, we begin to see that, and then we look at the description of the tomb, and that should sound familiar. I said it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. We look at this story back on Easter, right? Because this miracle, the last one that we have recorded in John right before Jesus is crucified and buried, is a foreshadowing what Jesus is getting ready to do. First, he's going to raise Lazarus from the life, and then he is going to willingly lay down his life and then take it back up, because he had that authority. And so just as Lazarus was in a tomb and came out with the grave clothes on him, we see that Jesus is put in a tomb. They roll a rock across it. He's wrapped in those same grave clothes, but we saw that 3 days later he rose. He took the grave clothes off himself because they had no hold on him, and he had the authority, and he gives the command even here to take them off of Lazarus and let him go. That's what Jesus desires for you and I. He is calling us out of death. For Lazarus, it was physical. For you and I, it is spiritual. He calls us out of death and into life, into a life with him. And he calls us to remove the things of this world so that we can live the life of freedom that he has for us. And then we continue to see this story of building faith. We look at Martha, right? This is where the tires meet the road, right? Martha, at this point, Jesus has already made his promise. Martha said she believes in who Jesus is. And so now we've got Jesus saying, okay, you said you believe, now move the stone. All right, this is where she has to act upon what she said. She's got to make sure that she meets what she's really saying. And so Jesus says, okay, you said it, now remove the stone. You see, sometimes we go through, we begin to believe Jesus, and we know he's made this promise, but because of everything that's happening, we forget it. Right? And Jesus, he's patient with us, and he begins to build up and encourage our faith. Right? It's acting on our faith that will set us apart. A lot of people say they believe, but to act on what we believe is what is truly going to set us apart. Right? We remember Peter, not because he believed it was Jesus that was out on the water. Right? Some of the other disciples, we're pretty sure they believed, right? But we remember Peter because he stepped out of the boat onto the water. Right? He walked out to be with Jesus. He stepped out on his faith. It is acting in our faith, it is stepping out in faith that will set you and I apart. That way we can be witnesses for the God that we believe in. I also want us to look at this process that Jesus takes Martha through as he begins to teach her. Right? The first thing he does is he gives her that promise. Right? Before Lazarus was even dead, when Mary and Martha sent somebody to tell Jesus that Lazarus, the one you love, is sick, Jesus sent back word to him. He says that this sickness will not end in death. It is for the glory of God to be seen. Right? He makes Martha a promise. And then he begins to draw her attention off of what's going on and onto himself. When you and I, when we begin to go through life, we walk through those storms and we do okay for a while, but we need to fix our eyes on Jesus. That's what Hebrews tells us, right? Fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who has run the race set before him, right? Peter, when he stepped out on the boat, as long as his eyes were on Jesus, he was able to do the impossible. But when his eyes went on to the things around him and he began to see the storm taking place, that's when he began to sink. He makes her a promise. Peter stood not upon the water, but upon Jesus' words. Right? Jesus has given his words to Mary and Martha, and now he makes Martha begin to focus not on the things around her, not on what's happened, but upon himself. And then he makes her confess her faith. Right? You're looking at me. What do you believe? Right? I believe what you say. I believe what you've said to me. I believe that you are the resurrection. I believe that you are the life. Right? She confesses what she believes, and then he makes her act upon her belief. Right? Remove the stone. I've made you a promise. Keep your eyes on me. Remind yourself what you believe, and then act upon that belief. And so they remove the stone. And then Jesus redirects the people's attention. Right? Every miracle has one purpose: to point people to God. Right? That's what it's about. It's about building faith. If the miracle's done for you, then God is doing that, remind you who he is, remind you how much he loves you, and trying to draw you closer to him. If the miracle is done in somebody else's life and people get to see it, it's done not to draw attention to whoever has the miracle done for them, not to be drawing attention to whoever prayed and saw the person healed. The miracle's purpose is that the person seeing will see that God is doing the impossible and that they will believe in God. That's the purpose of a miracle. So what Jesus does is he gets people to stop looking at him as a man, because he was fully God, fully man. He gets them to stop looking at him as a man and to focus on God the Father. And so what's he do? He says a prayer. Right? He says, God, I thank you that you hear me. I know that you always hear me, but I say this not for me, but for them. He's refocusing the people on God, saying this is the purpose of the miracle. Right? And he says this prayer. It's not elaborate. It's not drawn out. It's nothing fancy. It's simple and it's pure, because it's not meant to draw attention to him, but to God. And so that's what it does. Right? And then Jesus gives the command, and when Jesus gives the command, even the dead listen. All right, what is in your life? What dreams or things have you forgotten? What's going on in your body? What's going on in your life right now? You say this is a dead situation, because if you will speak the words of Jesus, if he will give you a promise and you will stand on that promise and you will act on that promise, when Jesus speaks, the dead listen. And Lazarus comes out. From death to life, from chains to freedom, physically with Lazarus, but spiritually for you and I. Jesus calls for the grave clothes to be removed, the things that have held us, the things that cause us to stink, the things that are slowing us down, the things that are holding us back. Jesus offers life. He calls for those things to be removed so that we can enjoy the life he gives. And so we see that Lazarus comes out of the grave and back to life. Picking up in verse 45, it says that therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. And then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here's this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And then the Romans will come, and they'll take away both our temple and our nation. And then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. Now he did not say this of his own, but as high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. And not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and make them one. And so from that day on, they plotted to take his life.
Jesus dio lieko benast ako Jude na Mary yikaigi Jesus yana yagi da yiltsago da yostlago ya da josle den nadalat eya Pharisee dan lini yitre hes kaigo Jesus na yana yahigi ya da holne ako alako nada ilnihi in the Pharisee dan lini Yanda ay Allah dayi lahko atadini Khaysha tadini Joti the nebebe zili be bedawzini sakuyana ga Ako edigi to be bandit ego ko the net alt tabit old class tabito class Aro round the net do kako nihit hodihingo has aniki indan hidden eniki kayat apel has and nihit atedol chon. This has legi sa kiafes Joliego yena Yahai gibi alako na isnihi Jalego hazo ziko jene Aron hisbeta hozenta the net egi the net altro yatta dot salko Ako jude nedot art adot dilko Nacha yat egi edo banzida kesta. Edot edot hanik chazot zita ndit yichagi bi lako na isni jeliko. Jesus Judene yata dot salchnegot apetsede achot on nili bahojolne. Aro dot edenet bata ndedien ga balchene an tgelend tradas kaiget Allah idolil aldopenie. Ako begido da hodio skesiki yandat.
And so the three focuses on the book of John are signs, believe, and life. And so here Jesus does a sign, he does a miracle, and literally brings somebody back to life. Now because of this, people begin to believe in him, and then spiritually, they begin to receive life. And so we see that some people begin to believe, and then we see the other side of this where it says that some people, they went and told on Jesus. This is what he's done this time. And they hold to their tradition, they hold to the things that they've known. And instead of believing, they turn their backs on Jesus. And they go to the Pharisees. And then we've got these Jewish leaders, they call them the Sanhedrin, the leaders of this time. And so this is made up mainly of the Sadducees, actually, not the Pharisees. There may have been some Pharisees involved, but this is mainly the Sadducee group, a very political, a wealthy group that used their wealth to hold on to power. And so here they are in this religious position of power, and they begin to see what Jesus is doing. They begin to see that they're losing power because people are no longer turning to them. They're no longer relying on them for answers about God, but they're seeing that Jesus is doing and beginning to believe in him. And so once they see this, they decide to kill him so that they can hold on to their power and their position. And then we see this, the high priest comes up. He's the leader of all of them. He begins to speak prophetically. He begins to speak of the future. He begins to speak a message from God that goes beyond his own understanding, what he was thinking. And so he speaks, and he's thinking, hey, you know what? It's better for us to kill this one guy, and that by killing him, we get a hold on to our power. Now, that's not how he said it, right? The way that they said it is they were worried about the Romans coming in. If there was some kind of uprising, and they would worry about, man, things are going to happen. The Romans are going to come in, and they're going to attack all of us and take everything away because we rebelled. And so they're like, you know what? If we kill him, everybody else is going to be better off. Now they thought about that, but their main concern was losing their position, was losing their power. And so because of this, they made this decision, and this priest begins to speak up. Now, this priest was speaking for themselves, and he spoke for the Jewish nation. But John clarifies in those passages, he says that this is going to go beyond just those in Israel. This is going to go to the scattered children of God all around the world and bring all who believe together in spirit. Right? When we talk about the church, the real church is not a building. It is the body of believers. And we have local body of believers, right? your local church, wherever you're attending here at Pruitt or at the churches in Thoreau and Blue Water and Haystack and down in Milan or in Albuquerque or across the world. We have local churches, right? Those local bodies. But then there is the international church, the church of the world, that is the body of believers around the world. And John is emphasizing in this that by Jesus dying, he wasn't just dying for Israel. He died for the entire world, that anybody who believed in him would become a part. Anybody who believed in him would become one body, not separated. Something else I want to point out that we learn from this section. Right? The Bible tells us that all leadership is appointed by God. That means whether we think a leader is good or whether we think a leader is bad, whether we would call them a King Saul or a King David, no matter our view of leadership, that leader has been placed there by God for his purposes. Now that goes everywhere from the church and the pastor of every church up to the government with our chapter houses, and it goes up to our governor of the states, and it goes up to the president, right? All leadership is appointed by God for whatever reason he needs to accomplish something through them, which is why it's important that we always honor those positions even when we disagree with the people, right? It's okay when we disagree with them. It's how we disagree that matters, and it's important that we honor them and we honor that position. Right, here is this priest, and this high priest, he by no means cared about God. If he did, he would understand who Jesus was. So he was not concerned about the well-being of God and his people. He was concerned about his position, his power, and his wallet. Right? And yet he still spoke prophetically. God used the position and the man that was in that position to speak in word that would give hope to the people, that one man would die, that the world, that you and I may live. He spoke it through the position, even though that man was not honoring him. God will work through people in positions of power, so we respect that. We also see here that when we talk about the Jews, we looked at this before in chapter 4 with the Samaritan woman. The Jews looked down on other people, right? The Jews had misused what God had done. God had said, I am going to use you to be a blessing to the world. That was the promise to Abraham. But the Jews had said, we're God's chosen people. Man, if you're not one of us, then you're nothing. And they began to look down at others as lesser. But John is pointing out here, one of the things that he's doing is that Jesus' death was meant for everyone. Every person, every language, anyone who would believe in him is welcomed into the family of Christ, and all are equal. None is greater, none is less. Doesn't matter how long somebody's been saved, we are all equal once we come to Christ. We all have an equal place in the body. Nothing can separate us. Human beings are made in his image. We are a reflection of who he is. And when we accept him, we become one body together. Nothing can separate us. Not being from different nations, not having different skin colors, not speaking different languages. One day, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, every tongue, every language will worship God together. That day is coming. Once we come to Christ, we're all equal in him. And so Jesus died for each and every one of us. John makes sure that we understand that. And then with that statement from the high priest, the decision is made. They've tried a couple other times to seize Jesus or to stone him, but now the decision is made. We're going to kill this man. And the final few verses today says, verse 54, therefore Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with the disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, what do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all? But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him.
Epa Jesus dort ait ene Juden hebet tranage darande Arohono Jibiraki Kea Lego Ephraim hol Yego Kenhal Ahigo Jeniako Ad Hudahol Ahibitin Jakrend Jesus Yedol Tul Hodon Need Aro Judana Bet His Destabe Behanihi Kada Bahol Jish Akot His Destabe Behanihi Aro Bahol Jishko at the Dash Dol Dahbeniyet o Jiu Keda Yato Jerusalem Gota Ziske Ako Jesus Ako Jesus Hata Days Ego can be so it is in Bishas Agone Nzigo Ata Hishtne Hashit Egon Tzidach case Wadil Zingo Allah Nat Lehijin that's Edo Jido Gasta Jo Alako Nada Isni in the Pharisee Dan Lini Yetahosh Ago Atadini the net ahead Jesus na Rahake Hoshbeho Zinigi Eba Hostorne Akote Dilsos.
So Jesus, getting word of their plan, he withdraws. He goes to a separate area, and he goes to this area called Ephraim. And for the last few weeks, we're now just within about a month of when Jesus is going to be arrested and crucified. And so he withdraws to Ephraim for a few weeks, and he begins to spend these last few weeks with his disciples. He spends some final moments. He knows that the time is coming. He knows what's getting ready to happen. And so he withdraws to spend this time. And then about a week before Passover, people would begin to arrive, and they begin to go through this cleansing period. They want to be able to partake in Passover, and so if there's anything that they had done where they need to make sacrifices, or they needed to make sure that they were cleansed, that way they could be a part of it, then they would come in early, about a week, and they begin to get ready for Passover. And so at this time, the people begin to arrive. They know that Passover is next week. They're coming in, and they begin to look around, right? Every time Jesus shows up, something amazing has happened, right? They're beginning to see blind eyes open. They're seeing a man that was lame begin to walk. They're seeing all these things happen. The last thing they had heard, Jesus had raised a man that was dead back to life, right? So these people are like, man, when's this guy going to show up? Because we know when he does, something good is going to happen. And so they begin to look around. But we know that everything that Jesus did, he always said, you know what? I listen to the Father. I do only what the Father tells me. I go where the Father tells me to go, and I go when the Father tells me to go. Remember, if we look back, we saw his brothers at one of the feasts were trying to say, hey, anybody who wants to get known, anybody who wants to get attention, aren't they going to make a public appearance at the feast? And he didn't go when they did, because they were trying to draw attention to him. But Jesus, his role was to obey God. Right? His actions were meant to obey God and to honor God. And so that's what he's doing here again. He's not showing up to draw attention to himself. He's not wanting the people to get distracted from the focus. He's preparing that way when he shows up, when he comes, he can continue to teach and he can continue to prepare them for Jesus. And so we're going to continue this. We're going to pick up next week in John chapter 12. The people have been looking for Jesus, and so here we are on a Saturday a few weeks later, and Jesus comes back to Jerusalem. He knows what's getting to happen this time. He comes in on a Saturday. He goes back to Lazarus' house, and there we saw at the beginning of chapter 11 where John referred to, this is the Mary who anointed Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. We'll see that next week in John chapter 12. That was how this is who this family was known for, and so John included it before, that way giving reference to the people reading it in that time. And so now we come across that story on a Saturday night, and then the next day is Sunday, the beginning of what we call the Passion Week, the week of Jesus' trial, the week of Jesus' struggles, and the week that everything happens, where he's betrayed, the Last Supper, and we're going to begin to set up for those things next week with Jesus' triumphal entry on Sunday. So we appreciate you guys joining us today. I pray that this was a blessing to you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know. Feel free to reach out to me or the church. And let's pray today and pray that God will bless you. Lord, I thank you for each and every person who was able to join us tonight. Lord, I ask that you would bless them. Lord, I ask that you would keep them and cause your face to shine down upon them. I pray for peace. Lord, I pray that you would heal the hurting hearts. Lord, I pray for those, God, who have thought their dreams were dead, who have thought they found a situation with no hope, God, that you would speak life to them, that you would speak a promise to them, God, and that you would help them to speak out their faith and walk out their faith. God, that we'd begin to see you work in our lives. God, I pray that we begin to see you work in this church. I pray that I begin to see you work in my life. Lord, that we would step into who you are calling us to be and encounter all that you have for us. Lord, we thank you, we worship you, we love you, and we ask you to have your way. In Jesus' name, amen. I appreciate you guys joining us tonight. I hope you guys will join us Sunday. We're going to be going and giving a message to the fatherless. We're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 9 as we study the story of Mephibosheth, and we talk about the boy who would be king and the God who wants to be a father to the fatherless. So we'll see you Sunday. We appreciate it. Pray you have a good week. Be blessed. Bye-bye.